Listen to the short chord progression in C minor. We'll start with a champagne progression, 1 to 4/6 to 1/6, and end with an authentic cadence set up by a cadential 6/4, 1/6/4, 5/7, 1. And we'll connect those two patterns by step with a root position 4 chord. Now let's just change one note. We'll raise the final E flat to E natural, turning the minor tonic into a major tonic. Hear the difference? We were expecting a minor chord, but flipped the script by making it major. That's called a Picardy third, a major tonic chord at the end of an otherwise minor key passage or piece. Today, it might seem like a surprise ending or even a cliche, but it actually comes from a long-standing tradition in Renaissance music. In that era, major chords were considered more stable than minor ones because the major triad aligns with the harmonic series of its root, whereas the minor triad does not. So, to strengthen the end of a phrase or piece, composers would often substitute a major chord for the expected minor tonic. This wasn't just reserved for final cadences, it could also happen at the end of a phrase within a piece, even though all of the other tonic chords would remain minor. Let's hear some variations using different cadence types. First, here's our original, unaltered minor key progression. This is an imperfect authentic cadence, authentic because it goes from 5/7 to 1 in root position, and imperfect because the soprano ends on scale degree 3 instead of 1. Now, here it is again, this time ending with the Picardy third. Let's add one more variation, a 4/3 suspension on the final tonic chord and a Picardy third. Isn't that cool? The suspension delays the resolution, and the Picardy third adds a surprise. Composers loved combining suspensions with Picardy thirds. They turn an otherwise predictable cadence into something a little more special. Now, let's change things up a bit. We'll go back to our original minor key progression, but instead of ending at the authentic cadence, we'll tag on a Plagal cadence, 4 to 1. Now let's hear that with a Picardy third at the Plagal cadence. And let's gild the lily by adding a 4/3 suspension to the final tonic chord. Now, that's satisfying. By ending with the imperfect authentic cadence on a minor chord, we really solidify the minor mode, and then the surprise major chord at the very end hits even harder. That extra Plagal tag, the suspension, and the Picardy third all combine to make something much more dramatic. Let's look at one more variation. This one will lead into a very famous example. Let's zoom in on the suspension at the final chord, where the 4 moves to 3. Sometimes composers would resolve 4 to 3 and then dip down to 2 as a lower neighbor before returning back to 3. That sounds familiar, right? Now let's try this. Instead of stepping down, we'll leap down from 4 to 2, then step back up to 3. It's still a 4/3 suspension, but that leap adds a new twist. Think of it as a decorated suspension. The 3 is just delayed a little more creatively. Now we're ready to listen to one of the most famous Picardy thirds in Western music. And it's not even at the end of a piece, it's at the end of the opening phrase. recognize that? That's Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. This is an imperfect authentic cadence using a 7 diminished 7 chord instead of 5/7, with a Picardy third, preceded by a decorated 4/3 suspension. This one also has a pedal tone, the tonic chord held underneath both the 7 diminished chord and the 1 chord, even though it's not in that 7 chord. Let's hear the cadence again. Dramatic, right? And ironically, this piece doesn't even end with a Picardy third, or even a regular authentic cadence at all. It goes from sort of a minor 5 chord to a major 6 chord with some suspensions, leading into a minor 4 and a minor 1, a Plagal cadence. Very unlike Bach. That ending, plus many other unstylistic approaches to both harmony and melody, have led some scholars to doubt whether Bach even wrote this piece, although nobody really knows for sure. So, why is this called a Picardy third? As with many musical terms, the answer is murky. The name refers to the Picardy region of France, but it's not clear whether composers there really used the technique more than others, or if the name was just a joke. The term wasn't coined until the mid-1700s, long after the technique had become common in Renaissance and Baroque music, especially in church music. Some scholars think it might have been a tongue-in-cheek reference, like, oh, that's the kind of ending they love in all those churches in Picardy. But the name stuck, so that's what we call it, a Picardy third. Composers continued using the Picardy third well into the classical period, and even today. Sometimes it feels dramatic, it can feel nostalgic or ironic, or a cliche. In larger scale works, like symphonies, composers often take that idea further. They start the symphony in a minor key, and the final movement will end in a major key. Some famous examples include Beethoven's 5th and 9th symphonies, Tchaikovsky's 4th and 5th symphonies, and Brahms' 1st. A question I often hear is there a reverse Picardy third? Do major key pieces sometimes end on a minor chord? Basically, no, at least not historically. The whole point of the Picardy third was to make the ending more stable and satisfying, so composers had no reason to reduce stability at the end of a major piece. But in modern music, anything goes, especially thinking about larger scale works like symphonies. A great example is Sibelius's 4th Symphony. It opens in A minor, then in the last movement, it seems to shift towards A major, only to drift back and forth between A major and E flat major a tritone away, before finally settling back to A minor. It's haunting, ambiguous, and not final sounding, but it's very powerful. Check it out. So now I want to hear from you. What's your favorite use of the Picardy third, whether it's at the end of a phrase, the end of a piece, or a whole movement? Or do you think the whole thing is kind of silly and cliche? Drop it in the comments, and as always, stay tuned for more chord by chord explanations here at Dr. Fromm's Music Lab.